The signal arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, piercing through layers of electromagnetic interference that had kept Earth isolated from galactic communications for centuries. In the subterranean monitoring station beneath the Atacama Desert, Dr. Sarah Chen stared at her display in disbelief as the alien transmission resolved itself into clear, desperate words. To any civilizations receiving this message, we need help. The crystals are consuming everything. The Atacama facility hadn't received a genuine alien transmission since the Great Silence began 300 years ago, when humanity chose isolation after their first, brief contact with the galactic community. But they had never stopped listening, never stopped preparing. Sarah's fingers flew across the haptic interface, running authentication protocols that had gathered dust for generations. The message was genuine, and it was terrifying. The concordat of allied species requires immediate assistance, the transmission continued. An entity of crystalline composition has emerged from the galactic core, consuming entire star systems. Our weapons pass through it harmlessly. Our shields shatter on contact. 11 billion lives lost. Please respond. The message repeated, cycling through various frequencies and encoding patterns. Sarah initiated the emergency contact protocol, her hand trembling slightly as she pressed her palm against the biometric scanner. Deep beneath the Earth's surface, in hardened bunkers and hidden facilities, alert systems began to activate. Admiral David Santos was eating breakfast with his grandchildren when the alert reached him. The small quantum communicator embedded in his wrist vibrated with a pattern he had trained for, but never expected to feel. His face remained calm as he kissed his grandchildren goodbye, but his mind was already shifting into operational mode. "It's happening," he said simply when his aide met him at the door. "Wake up the fleet." Across the solar system, humanity's carefully hidden military infrastructure began to stir. In the asteroid belt, massive fabrication facilities shed their camouflage, revealing production lines that had been maintaining equipment for centuries. Beneath the ice of Europa, vast hangars began to warm as environmental systems activated. On Mars, underground training facilities that had kept Earth's finest warriors sharp through generations of peace began launching their first real combat preparations. The aliens who had once dismissed Earth as a death world inhabited by dangerous primitives had never suspected the truth. Humanity hadn't regressed during their isolation. They had prepared. Every technological advancement, every scientific breakthrough had been carefully hidden behind a facade of primitive telecommunications and modest space exploration. In a secure conference room deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Earth's military leadership assembled within hours of the signal's arrival. Admiral Santos studied the holographic display showing the crystalline entity's path of destruction across the galaxy. The Concordat's weapons are based entirely on energy projection and electromagnetic manipulation, General Sarah Martinez noted, highlighting relevant sections of the transmission data. "No wonder they can't hurt this thing. They abandoned physical warfare millennia ago." "Precisely why they need us," Santos replied. "Humanity never had that luxury. Earth made us strong, made us keep our edge. We learned to fight with everything available: kinetic weapons, chemical reactions, gravitational manipulation. We never stopped developing all forms of warfare because our world taught us to use every tool at our disposal." He gestured, and the display shifted to show Earth's hidden fleet. Thousands of ships, each one embodying centuries of careful advancement in military technology. They weren't beautiful like the Concordat's vessels. They were efficient, redundant, designed to continue fighting even when severely damaged. Just like the humans who crewed them. "What's our response going to be?" Martins asked, though she already knew the answer. Everyone in the room did. Santos smiled grimly. "We're going to show the galaxy why they called Earth a death world. And then we're going to teach them how to survive like we did." He activated the General Command channel. "This is Admiral Santos to all fleet personnel. Operation Lighthouse is now active. I repeat, Operation Lighthouse is active." Across the solar system, Sealed cryopods began the revival process for specially trained crew members. Weapon systems that had only ever been tested in simulation prepared for real combat. Ships that had never left their hidden berths began powering up their engines. Humanity had spent 3 centuries preparing for a moment like this. Now they would remind the galaxy that sometimes the most dangerous species are the ones that learn to survive on worlds that try to kill them. The Deathworlders were going to war. Send the response, Santos ordered. Tell them help is coming. And may whatever gods they believe in help these crystals when we arrive. The warning signal had been received. Now it was time for humanity to show the galaxy what they had become during their long isolation. The fleet was awake, and Earth's children were ready to demonstrate why evolution on a death world produced the finest warriors in the galaxy. The crystalline entity was about to learn why some species are called survivors. The Concordat diplomatic vessel Celestial Harmony emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system, its crystalline hull refracting sunlight in prismatic patterns. Ambassador Zaraven, a being of translucent tissues and bioluminescent neural pathways, stood at the observation deck, expecting to find a primitive civilization fairly capable of interplanetary travel. What she saw instead made her neural patterns pulse with shock. Massive warships moved in precise formation around Mars, their hulls dark and angular, bearing none of the aesthetic considerations that marked Concordat vessels. These ships were built for one purpose only: war. Behind them, the asteroid belt buzzed with activity as automated factories converted raw materials into ammunition and spare parts at an incredible rate. Impossible, her aide whispered. Their last transmission showed them barely achieving basic spaceflight. This level of advancement. They deceived us, Zaraven realized. All this time, they were preparing. The human escort vessel that approached them was smaller than the warships, but no less intimidating. Its hull bore visible battle scars from what could only be live-fire exercises. Captain Maya Rodriguez's holographic image appeared in their communication chamber, her expression professional, but carrying an intensity that made the Concordat diplomats unconsciously draw back. "Welcome to Sol," Rodriguez said. "Admiral Santos is waiting to brief you on our response strategy." The briefing took place on Phobos base, in a chamber carved deep into the Martian moon. As the Concordat delegation entered, they found themselves facing not just military leaders, but a diverse group of specialists: physicists, engineers, xenobiologists, and tactical experts. Admiral Santos stood before a holographic display showing the crystalline entity's destruction pattern. "Your energy weapons pass through the crystal harmlessly because they're designed to affect normal matter," he explained. "But we've been analyzing your data, and we have a different approach." He gestured, and the display shifted to show human weapon systems: kinetic impact weapons, chemical explosives, gravitational disruptors. We never abandoned primitive warfare technology. We perfected it alongside our energy weapons. Your civilization chose elegance. Earth taught us to use everything available. The demonstration that followed left the Concordat representatives stunned. Humans showed recordings of their ships intentionally taking damage during training, crews continuing to fight even with multiple systems down. They watched soldiers training in environments that would kill most Concordat species instantly. "Your ships are designed to avoid damage," Martinez explained. "Ours are designed to take it and keep fighting. Redundant systems, compartmentalized sections, manual overrides for everything. We assume something will go wrong and plan accordingly." "But the psychological toll," Zaraven began, "is precisely why we're stronger," Rodriguez interrupted. "Earth is a death world. Everything here tried to kill us: the weather, the wildlife, the planet itself. We didn't just survive, we learned to thrive under pressure. Your people avoid damage. We expect it and adapt." The demonstrations continued. Human ships performed maneuvers that seemed suicidal to Concordat observers, deliberately using damaged sections as weapons. Ground forces showed combat techniques that emphasized improvisation and adaptation rather than rigid strategy. "Here's our proposal," Santos said finally. "We'll commit our full fleet to defending Concordat space. In return, you'll help us understand this crystal entity's composition. Together, we might learn something neither of us could discover alone." Zaraven studied the human admiral. "You're not what we expected," she admitted. "When we received your response, we thought that we were primitive barbarians." Santos smiled. "No, we're survivors. We've spent centuries preparing for threats exactly like this. Now we'll show you why Deathworld species make the best allies." The first joint training exercises revealed the stark differences between human and Concordat military doctrine. Where Concordat ships flew in perfect formation, human vessels seemed to move chaotically, until observers realized each apparent chaos masked a deliberate strategy. During one simulation, a human destroyer lost its main weapons. Instead of withdrawing as Concordat protocol demanded, the crew deliberately vented their engine plasma to create a weapon of opportunity, using their damaged ship as bait to draw enemy fire from their allies. "Your people's adaptability is remarkable," Zaraven told Rodriguez after watching the exercise, "but also terrifying." "That's what Earth taught us," Rodriguez replied. "Life finds a way. So do we." As the combined fleet prepared for their first engagement with the crystal entity, the Concordat began to understand why humans had been labeled as Deathworlders. It wasn't just their physical capabilities or their advanced weapons. It was their fundamental approach to existence, an unflinching acceptance that survival sometimes required embracing the unthinkable. The crystal entity was about to face something it had never encountered before, a species that had evolved on a world that taught them victory sometimes came through endurance rather than perfection. The Deathworlders were bringing their own form of evolution to the battlefield. The first engagement with the crystal entity occurred in the Proxima Centauri system. Captain Maya Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the destroyer Thunderchild, watching as the massive crystalline structure emerged from hyperspace. It dwarfed her ship, its surface refracting starlight in ways that defied physics. "All stations, combat ready," she ordered, her voice steady despite the tension. "Remember your training. This thing hasn't met humans yet." The entity moved with an alien grace, its crystalline appendages stretching across space like frozen lightning. Behind the Thunderchild, the combined human Concordat fleet held position, waiting to see how their new allies would handle first contact. "Launch probe Salvo 1, Rodriguez commanded. Dozens of small, unmanned vehicles shot toward the entity, each carrying different sensor packages. Within seconds, the crystal's defenses activated, energy beams lashing out to destroy the probes. But the humans had expected this. Each destroyed probe released a cloud of specialized nanites, designed to analyze the crystal's composition during the microseconds of contact. Data streamed back to the fleet. "Got you," Dr. Chen announced from her science station. "The crystal's outer layer isn't uniform. There are frequency patterns, almost like a nervous system," Rodriguez finished. "Tactical, prepare sonic disruptors. Let's see how it likes a change in tune." The Thunderchild's experimental weapons powered up, broadcasting specific frequencies through space. The crystal entity shuddered, its movements becoming erratic. But then it adapted, its structure shifting to absorb the vibrations. "It's learning," Chen reported, restructuring its lattice too. The entity's counterattack came without warning. Crystal shards launched like missiles, each one carrying a charge that could overload ship shields. 3 Concordat vessels fell back, their elegant defenses overwhelmed. But the Thunderchild and her sister ships had been built with multiple redundant systems. As crystal shards pierced their outer hulls, emergency bulkheads slammed shut. Damaged sections were vented to space, denying the enemy a foothold. "Launch countermeasures," Rodriguez ordered. Pattern Delta. Specially designed warheads detonated near the crystal, releasing clouds of engineered bacteria. Another uniquely human approach. The microscopic organisms were designed to attempt to colonize the crystal's surface, probing for weaknesses in its structure. The entity's response was unexpected. Its entire form began to vibrate, generating harmonics that threatened to tear ships apart. The Concordat fleet retreated in disarray, their sophisticated sensors overwhelmed by the cacophony. But human ships pressed forward. Their crews, trained to operate in the worst conditions Earth could provide, adapted. When automated systems failed, they switched to manual controls. When communications were disrupted, they fell back on pre-planned protocols. "Look at those energy patterns," Chen said suddenly. "Every time it adapts, there's a moment of vulnerability, like it has to reorganize its entire structure." Rodriguez studied the data. "Can we predict when these transitions will occur?" "Better than that," Chen replied. "I think we can trigger them." The next hour saw a deadly dance of adaptation and counter-adaptation. Human ships coordinated their attacks, forcing the crystal entity to constantly shift its defenses. Each change revealed new data about its structure and capabilities. "It's not just one organism," Chen announced as new analysis came in. "It's a colony, like coral. Each section can operate independently, but they prefer to act as a whole." Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Then let's give them an incentive to disagree with each other." The Thunderchild's next attack wasn't aimed at destroying the crystal. Instead, they broadcast specific frequencies designed to interfere with the entity's internal communication. Different sections began responding to threats independently, their actions no longer coordinated. "We're receiving a transmission from the entity," communications reported. "It's adapting our language protocols." "Put it through," Rodriguez ordered. The voice that came through was unlike anything they'd heard before, a chorus of crystalline harmonics attempting to form human words. "You fight differently. We evolved differently," Rodriguez replied, "on a world that taught us adaptation is survival." There was a pause, filled with strange harmonics. "We learn, adapt, consume. You resist differently. New patterns. New possibilities." "That's right," Rodriguez said. "And we're offering you a choice. Continue fighting, and we'll keep adapting, keep finding new ways to resist. Or we can explore those new possibilities together." The crystal entity's form shifted again, but this time it wasn't an attack pattern. Parts of its structure became transparent, revealing internal complexities they hadn't seen before. "We consider." Admiral Santos' voice came through on a secure channel. "Well done, Thunderchild. You've given us something we haven't had before, a chance to communicate." Rodriguez nodded, though her tactical officers maintained their weapons lock. First contact had led to understanding, but that understanding had come through strength. It was a very human approach to diplomacy. Be ready to fight, but also ready to talk. The crystal entity remained suspended in space, its structure continuing to shift in new patterns. They had proven themselves worthy of conversation, not through elegant technology or overwhelming force, but through their ability to adapt and survive. It was a lesson straight from Earth's harshest environments. Sometimes survival meant finding new ways to coexist. But you negotiated from a position of strength, and you never forgot that adaptation was a continuous process. The Concordat observers had watched the entire engagement in stunned silence. They had expected the humans to simply attack with overwhelming force. Instead, they had witnessed something far more impressive, the ability to turn a battle into a dialogue. "Your species continues to surprise us," Zara Ven told Rodriguez later. "You fought not to destroy, but to understand." "That's another lesson from Earth," Rodriguez replied. "The most successful species aren't always the strongest or the most aggressive. They're the ones that learn to adapt to new situations. Sometimes that means fighting. Sometimes it means finding another way." The crystal entity's decision would shape the future of galactic relations, but whatever came next, humanity had proven why Deathworld evolution produced not just survivors, but innovators. They had faced an unknown threat and found not just a way to fight it, but potentially a way to coexist with it. It was the most human solution possible: adapt, survive, and look for opportunities in the midst of crisis. The research vessel Copernicus drifted silently through the crystalline debris field, its specialized sensors probing the glittering fragments that remained from their first encounter. Dr. Sarah Chen studied the readings with intense concentration, her augmented reality display highlighting patterns that normal human eyes couldn't perceive. "There's something here we're missing," she muttered, manipulating the holographic data with practiced gestures. "The crystal entity doesn't just adapt, it evolves, but evolution requires." Her thoughts were interrupted by a proximity alert. Through the observation window, she watched as a section of seemingly dead crystal began to pulse with inner light. The fragment was rebuilding itself, drawing material from nearby debris. "All hands, Emergency Protocol 7, she announced calmly, even as her heart raced. "We've got active regeneration." The Copernicus's engines fired up, creating distance from the reactivating crystal. But Chen didn't order its destruction. Instead, she intensified her scans, watching in fascination as the fragment reconstructed itself into a smaller version of the main entity. "Captain Rodriguez," she called over the quantum comm. "I need the Thunder Child here immediately. I think I found something." Hours later, the command staff gathered in the Thunder Child's tactical room. The holographic display showed Chen's findings. Complex patterns of energy flowing through the crystal structure like blood through veins. "It's not just a colony," Chen explained. "It's a superorganism. Each fragment contains the entire genetic memory of the whole. But look at this." She highlighted a particular energy signature. "These patterns, they're similar to human brainwaves during learning." Admiral Santos leaned forward. "You're saying it's not just adapting to survive, it's trying to understand us." "Exactly. And I think I know why it chose to engage with us specifically." Chen brought up comparison data. "Our neural patterns are more chaotic than the Concordat species. We think faster, adapt quicker, make intuitive leaps. To the crystal entity, we're fascinating. And dangerous," Rodriguez added. "Don't forget it's still rebuilding its forces in 3 other systems. Which is why we need to act now," Chen said. "I've designed a communication interface that could allow direct neural connection with the entity. We could show it who we are, what Earth taught us about survival and cooperation." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what she was suggesting. "And the risks involved?" "Absolutely not," Santos said firmly. "The neural load would be overwhelming. We've seen what happens when the entity tries to integrate new patterns too quickly." "With respect, Admiral," Chen replied, "we don't have a choice. The entity is learning exponentially. Next time it attacks, it'll be ready for everything we showed it. We need to give it a reason not to fight." Rodriguez studied the scientist's determined expression. "You've already tested it, haven't you?" Chen nodded. "On the fragment we recovered. The interface works. But you're right. A full connection would be fatal to a normal human mind. That's why I volunteered to undergo the experimental neural enhancement procedure." The procedure had been developed for emergency situations, a way to temporarily boost human neural capacity at the cost of burning out the enhanced pathways. "One use, no second chances." Santos shook his head. "Doctor, you're too valuable to risk." "I'm exactly valuable enough," Chen interrupted. "I understand the crystal's patterns better than anyone. And this is what humanity does, isn't it? We take calculated risks to survive. To help others survive." The next 48 hours were a blur of preparation. The Copernicus's medical bay was converted into a neural enhancement facility. Concordat observers watched in horror as Chen underwent a procedure that would have killed any of their species instantly. The Thunder Child and its escort fleet took position near the crystal entity's main mass. This time, the entity didn't react with hostility. It seemed to be waiting. Chen sat in the specially designed interface chamber, her enhanced neural pathways already beginning to deteriorate. "Remember," she said to Rodriguez, "if the connection destabilizes, we sever it immediately." Rodriguez finished. "We're not losing you if we can help it. Some things are worth the risk." Chen smiled. Earth taught us that too. The interface activated. Chen's consciousness expanded, merging with the crystalline patterns she'd studied so carefully. The entity's thoughts were alien, complex geometries of purpose and memory. Through their connection, she showed the entity Earth the harsh beauty of evolution, the endless dance of adaptation and survival. She showed it humanity's history, the struggles that had shaped them, the challenges they had overcome not through dominance, but through innovation and cooperation. The entity responded with its own story. It had evolved in the space between stars, feeding on energy and radiation. It had never encountered beings that could match its rate of adaptation until humanity. Through Chen's mind, it began to understand concepts it had never considered: symbiosis, mutual growth, the strength that comes from diversity. On the Thunderchild's bridge, Rodriguez watched the readings with growing concern. Chen's neural patterns were deteriorating faster than expected. But the crystal entity was changing too, its structure shifting into new configurations they had never seen before. "We need to pull her out," Santos ordered as Chen's life signs became critical. "Wait." Chen's voice came through, strained but determined. "Almost done." The entity's final transformation was beautiful and terrible to witness. Its crystalline surface flowered into impossible geometries, each facet reflecting not just light but possibilities. When it spoke again through the ship's communications, its voice was harmonic and clear. "We understand now. Survival through cooperation, growth through difference. These patterns, they are stronger than consumption." Chen's connection severed as her enhanced neural pathways collapsed. Medical teams rushed her to emergency care, but she was smiling. She had shown an alien intelligence why humanity's greatest strength wasn't their ability to fight, but their ability to find new ways to coexist. The price had been high. Chen would never fully recover her original neural function, but she had achieved something unprecedented: genuine understanding between two radically different forms of life. The crystal entity, true to its new understanding, began to share its own knowledge. It showed them how to manipulate matter at the crystalline level, how to store energy in ways they had never imagined. In return, humanity taught it about adaptation through cooperation rather than consumption. Was it worth it? Rodriguez asked Chen later, as they watched the entity teaching Concordat scientists how to grow crystal ships that could survive in any environment. Chen, her speech slightly slurred from neural damage, but her mind still sharp, nodded. "Earth taught us that sometimes the greatest victories require the greatest sacrifices, but it also taught us that life finds a way. Always." 5 years after first contact with the crystal entity, the Galactic Assembly gathered for an historic session. The massive chamber, newly constructed from a combination of Concordat architecture and crystal entity engineering, hosted representatives from across known space. Admiral Santos, now serving as Earth's ambassador, stood at the podium, his weathered face reflecting the changes he'd witnessed. The chamber itself was a testament to their new cooperation: crystalline structures that could reconfigure themselves to accommodate any species' needs, powered by human-designed energy systems that combined efficiency with adaptability. Above them, a section of the crystal entity floated serenely, its facets shifting in patterns that those who had learned its language could read as expressions of peace and curiosity. 5 years ago, Santos began, 3 very different species came together out of necessity. Today, we gather by choice, because we've learned that our differences make us stronger. In the audience, Dr. Chen sat in her hover chair, her body still bearing the price of her neural sacrifice. But her eyes were bright as she watched crystal-enhanced ships dock at the station outside, their hybrid crews representing the best of all 3 civilizations. Though she could no longer interface directly with the crystal entity, she had trained a new generation of researchers who could. "The Concordat taught us elegance and harmony," Santos continued. "The crystal entity showed us new ways to perceive reality itself. And humanity. We brought something that both our allies needed: the understanding that adaptation isn't just about survival. It's about finding new ways to thrive. The changes were evident throughout known space. Concordat ships now incorporated crystal technology and human-inspired redundancy systems. Crystal entities had learned to communicate through light and sound. Their vast intelligence turned to exploration rather than consumption. And humans had gained access to technologies they had never imagined, while teaching others the resilience that Earth had instilled in them. Captain Rodriguez, commanding the first hybrid ship Convergence, stood at her station surrounded by displays showing the integration of all three technologies. Her crew included humans, Concordat species, and even a small crystal entity that served as both navigator and shield generator. "We're receiving the new coordination protocols," her crystal crew member chimed, its structure gleaming with patterns of excitement. "The void between galaxies. We can explore it together now." Rodriguez smiled, remembering the battles that had led to this moment. That's what Earth taught us. There's always another frontier, another challenge to adapt to. But we face them better together. In the assembly chamber, Czar Aven took the podium after Santos. The Concordat diplomat's neural patterns pulsed with colors that would have been impossible before their contact with the crystal entity. "We once feared the humans," she admitted. "We called their world a death world, seeing only the harshness that shaped them. Now we understand. It was precisely that harshness that made them perfect intermediaries between our civilizations. They taught us that strength comes in many forms." The crystal entity's representative spoke next, its thoughts translated through the chamber's advanced systems. "We evolved to consume, to adapt through absorption. Humanity showed us a different path: adaptation through cooperation, growth through understanding. They gave us purpose beyond survival." In orbit around Earth, a new generation of students from all three civilizations trained together at the Adaptation Academy. They learned human survival techniques, Concordat energy manipulation, and crystal entity perception. More importantly, they learned to combine these skills in ways none of their species could have achieved alone. Dr. Chen, who often lectured at the Academy despite her impairments, had developed a saying: "Earth taught us to survive. Our allies taught us why survival matters. Together, we're learning what comes after survival." The assembly session concluded with the announcement of their most ambitious joint project yet, an expedition beyond the galaxy's edge, using ships that combined the best of all their technologies. The crystal entities could survive the void, Concordat systems could navigate it, and human adaptability would help them face whatever they found there. "This is how evolution should work," Santos told Rodriguez after the session. They stood in the observation dome, watching ships of all three designs moving in harmony through space, not through conflict, but through challenge and response, through finding new ways to become more than we were. Rodriguez nodded, thinking of her hybrid crew and how seamlessly they now worked together. "Earth taught us to expect challenges, to prepare for them. But it also taught us that life finds a way. Sometimes that way looks like nothing we could have imagined." The crystal entity's representative pulsed in agreement, its structure reflecting the starlight in ways that spoke of possibility. "Your world shaped you to survive anything. Our existence shaped us to adapt to everything. The Concordat's journey taught them to seek harmony. Together, we are becoming something new." As the assembly dispersed, its members returning to their ships and stations, the changes they had sparked continued to spread. Crystal technology merged with human innovation, and Concordat elegance created solutions to problems that had once seemed insurmountable. Diseases fell to combined medical knowledge, energy crises were solved through cooperative engineering, and the mysteries of space began to yield to their united efforts. Earth still bore its harsh challenges, still forged its children in the crucible of evolution. But now its lessons reached far beyond its atmosphere, teaching others that true strength comes not from dominance, but from the ability to adapt, to cooperate, to find new ways forward. The Deathworlders had indeed changed the galaxy, not through force of arms, but through the very adaptability their world had demanded of them. And in doing so, they had helped create something greater than any single species could have achieved alone. A future where diversity meant strength, where adaptation meant growth, and where the challenges ahead would be met not with fear, but with unified purpose. As the first joint expedition prepared to leave known space, Dr. Chen watched from her observatory, her sacrifice having helped pave the way for this moment. "Look how far we've come," she said softly, "by learning to survive together."